I'm John Forde. Coming up next on the St. Paul Forum, I'll be speaking with Councilmember Dai Thao of the St. Paul City Council. That's next on the St. Paul Forum. Welcome to the St. Paul Forum. I'm John Forde. With me this week is Councilmember Dai Thao. Welcome, Councilmember.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
You are from Precinct 1. I want to hear more about Precinct 1, but first, tell us about you. How did you get to St. Paul?
Sure. My family and I, we came here in 1983 as a political refugee. We were sponsored by an elderly white couple, and I lived a year in Minneapolis, and then South Minneapolis, and then we moved to North Minneapolis in the public housing. So spent a lot of time growing up in the public housing, and then, but I did a lot of organizing in St. Paul for racial and social justice issue.
And your teen years were in Minneapolis?
Yes, and I remember, so back in the old days, we didn't have a car, and this is before we learned how to ride the public bus, the public transit. So wherever we could walk, that's how far we could go. And, and we walked all the way to like Lake Harriet, Lake Calhoun, and it was really interesting because in the projects, there was a lot of poverty, crimes, drugs, gangs, but the further we got south, all the beautiful homes, the Lake of the Isles, I think that's part of the interesting thing that a refugee goes through, or I went through, and trying to figure out what's possible, right? Like, you know, how do these beautiful homes exist? And we live in the projects. There's something that's going on here, and that you know, maybe someday I can live in one of those houses, maybe. Yeah. But now I don't want to live in those houses.
Tell me about your education. You went to high school?
I went to, so it was a really interesting time because when we first came here, they put us in the EL program. And in 5th grade, I decided that I began to notice that they put all the Hmong kids in the EL classroom. And when I began to see that my other kids, the whites and black kids in my homeroom classroom, they were doing stuff that we weren't doing in the EL. They were studying history and writing and drawing. And so I asked my teacher, Mrs. Griffith, if I could do the same thing they're doing. And she said, I can't because I'm in ESL. And so that's when I began to ask my ESL teacher, why do we have to be here? You know, we want to be in the regular, I want to be in the regular classroom so that we can learn the things that those kids are learning. And to make this long story short, it was one of my first rebellion where I said, I'm not going to come to ESL anymore. I'm going to go back to my homeroom and learn what the other kids are learning. And so I thought all my friends in the ESL class was going to leave with me. But when I got up, they all stared at me like, are you crazy, right? And so I left anyway, and I think that made a difference. And so I ended up going to, I stopped going to ESL middle school, high school. I went to Henry, and then I transferred to Edison. And then my junior year, I moved to Missoula, Montana, and finished school out there.
Interesting.
Yeah,
okay.
And then I went to Montana State.
And what brought you, was it just your heart that brought you back to St. Paul, or how'd you get back?
Well, it was a difficult time because my mom, this is during there was a case in North Minneapolis where they're gonna demo the projects, right? The Glenwood Lindo projects. And so my mom was still resident, and they gave her a $5,000 voucher for her to move out. And to me, that was just, it was not sustainable because my mom was on SSI. She doesn't drive. She can't speak the language. And $5,000 is probably going to last her maybe 7 months the most for rent and in a place that is probably not going to provide the services she needs. So I decided to come back and you know, found work and bought a house and then moved her out to live with me. I think that was the main thing why I came back.
Did you know what you wanted to do when you were finishing high school? Did you have a vision of yourself that is kind of what you turned out to be?
You know, it wasn't a clear vision, but it was always instilled in me to help and to serve and to do good unto others. I always felt like the old couple that gave my family a chance to live in this country. It was always, how do I not let them down, right? Mm-hmm. And that's to serve this country, to do well, to help those who are in need. And I think my father is also the same way. And so those are just been things that has been instilled in me as a child.
Okay. So what did you study in college?
I study chemical engineering and computer science. I switched from chemical engineering to computer science, but on the minor was military science.
Okay. And then from there, you entered politics, but there's a gap. What happened in that phase?
Well, I was always been an activist in the community, and that was as a result of seeing a lot of injustice in America. Coming from a different country, we look at as America as paradise, a place from war and oppression. But to be here and to see that really motivated me to do something about that. So I did a community organizing with TakeAction Minnesota and with ISAIAH. And that's really where I learned how politics work, how power are built, and how deals are made, and how the community can actually leverage power so that we can get the kind of policy change that we need. And also because I work as an IT director for a long time with Keystone Community Services. And so it really put me engaged with what's happening in our community, and then following the ladder of where the policies are made, right? And that's really where change can impact, you can create change. But I realized that even though we have really good sound policy, sometimes the practices and the behavior of the folks who are supposed to uphold those policy, some of those are questionable. And so as a city council person and as a father and husband, we really need to have sound policy, but the behavior, the practice have to synchronize with those policy to ensure that we have the change that we want to see.
You have a fascinating life story, and you're just chomping at the bit to talk about policy, but I want to ask one more personal bit, and that is, how did you make the decision to actually run for public office? I felt a great sense of responsibility that we have in my ward or precinct, district. We have the most diverse. What we have in Ward 1 could be what St. Paul would look like in 10, 20, 30 years. And so I also saw that there was segregated, Asian, Black, white. And I felt like that's not where I want my kids to grow up in. I want my kids and my neighbors' kids to grow up in a society where, we embrace our histories and our difference, but yet we have mutual respect for each other. We can disagree, but we can come together and solve our problems together, because I think that's what makes us American, is because there's a problem and we come together to solve it together. And I come from a country of Laos, and that's not how they solve things, right? Okay.
So,
yes.
And it hasn't worked for them, but it has worked for Americans. And so I truly believe that our lives are linked, our lives are interconnected. And in order for my kids to have a good life, I have to make sure that my neighbors and the folks in my ward have a good life. And so I really believe in that, and that was through my transformative years of organizing, faith-based organizing, to understand that intellectually and to feel it spiritually. I think it's one of those amazing feelings, and that's why I ran.
Now, I don't know how they numbered the wards, but I know Ward 1 is at the center. Maybe they started in the middle and kind of went out in a fashion like that. And as an experienced walker, can you walk the perimeter for us? I mean, it's down Summit and then up the west?
Yeah, from east to west, it wraps around the Capitol, and it goes north to University, and then comes up on Sylvia, and then front. And then if you follow front all the way west, it goes to Lexington, and then it's weird. It comes down to University, and then it goes west again to Snelling, and then from Snelling, it goes all the way to Summit, the north side of Summit, all the way wrap around the cathedral, and then back up.
And so you have some of the richest as well as some of the poorest neighborhoods in St. Paul.
That's correct.
And one of the most diverse. Tell me about, I mean, the one big thing that's staring us in the face, I'm sure we could talk about the whole time, is of course the train. But tell me about some of the other businesses and organizations in Ward 1.
Yes, we have a lot of exciting stuff that's happened in Ward 1 down in Selby and Snelling. It's the Vintage, so it's market housing. On the first level is Whole Food, and then over 250 units of housing. So that's great. As a city council person, I've also want to make sure that pedestrians are able to cross safely. And so we're trying to come up with a solution for that. And then just north of that, the bus barn or with the old MnDOT site is, so there's a lot of energy around that. We're exploring what's called TOD, transit-oriented development, and looking at public and private partnership coming together to really build an anchor on that side. And then we also have the Frogtown Farm, which is amazing because it's very rare that you see such green space and farming in an urban setting. There's a lot of exciting stuff happening in Ward 1. We have a lot of energy and a lot of folks and organizations working around affordable housing. But there are things that we can work on, and that is trying to be economically competitive and to bring in light industrial job or a job that pays well. And though that's always been a challenge, but that is a challenge that I'm working on every day to figure out how we can solve that.
Okay.
Yeah.
In case you're just joining us, I'm speaking with Councilmember Dai Thao of Ward 1 in St. Paul. The big thing we've got to talk about is, of course, the train. It's as we tape, it's only 11 days away, but this will air over different times. So June 14th is the big launch date. How's it going to change, not just Ward 1, but all of the metro?
I think multiple levels, right? Like it's going to allow folks to travel to and from work, folks who depends on public transit. And public transit, it's good for our community. It's sustainable. It's stable. It's going to be there. Where I took the mayor and the other city council member. We took a ride the other day, and you could just imagine that when the Green Line opened up, and you're coming north from the Capitol, from downtown, and it's kind of like an incline, a hill, looking towards Minneapolis, and you can see clearly miles and miles stretching down, and just imagine there's buildings on either side, and it's beautiful, right? Imagine folks on either side of University Avenue, bustling, and business are booming, and then you have connections that connects to the north end, and you have connection that connects to Selby Avenue, and like a mini Boston type of city, and I'm really excited about that, and that there's jobs for young people, and we have stable family. And complementing that, it's the Promised Neighborhood, and that's making incredible strides every month. So I'm really excited. At the same time, I'm also concerned about public safety, and so we really want to make sure that if we're pedestrian, motorists, cyclists, that we follow and respect each other, and we follow the guideline, we follow the signal. There's going to be there's a couple of accidents already. And they're very minor, but we should be patient, take our time, and the police, we will talk to them, and they're definitely going to enforce the laws. So,
how is the line itself going to affect the businesses? I know a lot of businesses were just hanging on during construction, and some didn't make it, and now you've got the survivors, and hopefully they're positioned to really prosper.
Yes, we definitely, the analysis is that we will have a lot of eyes going through University Avenue, and we're hoping that, and we're working with the local businesses and business association to draw folks in, to have them stop. And it's really exciting. I don't know what exactly it's going to look like, but my understanding is that I think I'm going to have a better sense in the next 6 months to really test things out and see how it's going to impact some of the businesses.
Okay. We've been talking about all the upside, but I do have on my list of questions, what are some of the challenges facing Ward 1?
Right now, definitely poverty. There's still a lot of poverty along the north side of 94. And that's, I bring that up because poverty impacts how kids learn at school. Poverty impacts how mom and pop relate to each other in the home. It relates to the stability of the family and the kids' education and whether they have food on the table or a place to stay and to sleep. So that's out of poverty creates other issues, public safety, crime. It really impacts the quality of life around the neighborhood and even south of 94. And so that's extremely important. And so and the other thing is that we need to, again, I said earlier, to be economically competitive so that we can grow some of the smaller business so they can hire from the neighborhood. And then also to recruit light industrial business into the ward so that we can utilize some of our human capital. Now, Ward 1 has very hardworking folks. That's why they've been here. And they love Ward 1. They love the city of St. Paul. They're passionate about it. They're passionate about the garden. They're passionate about the folks in their community. And so we have all the assets, but we need to also come together to prepare ourselves and fight for the resource that we need to ensure that our community prosper. So, poverty, good paying jobs. We have really strong champion around affordable housing, so we need to continue to ensure that happens, and then make sure that our firefighters and our police officer have the means to protect and to serve our city.
You talked about some of the passion of people who live in Ward 1, and you also include Rondo, which has a tremendous following, but it's almost kind of nostalgic in a way because of what the freeway did to it. And is that kind of at odds when you've got that allegiance of nostalgia with the forward thinking, we've got to bring in new business, light industry and things like that for jobs for our people and our kids?
Well, I think, to fully understand Rondo, I may never understand what Rondo went through, but I think I have similar experience of being uprooted and being displaced. And so, I have a great deal of respect for that part of the history, and we need to continue to respect that, but we need to also build on that. And our struggle in the past should really be something that will strengthen us and bring us together, so we can embrace and co-create the future together. That's one of the reasons why I'm really supportive and working with the Rondo Museum, trying to find the resource so we can have a Rondo Museum and celebrate that. And don't let that be part of the African American history, but that's a part of Ward 1 history. That's part of St. Paul's history. And I think it's okay to embrace that, but at the same time, I think it's extremely important that we have to be competitive in the region. We have to be competitive, and the Twin Cities competing with the Chicago, the Milwaukee, the Madison, those other cities that are in similar climate. And so we really do need to work together and co-create a future that works for all.
Every day you get up and you've got a list of things you want to do that are your priorities. Do you have a mental top 3 that you're working on since you've taken office?
Sure. One of the things that's been brought up to me is our kids, given our kids access to the programs and services at Oxford Field or Jimmy Lee Community Center. There's that open, if you drive by, there's that open top space there, green space there. There's some work that needs to be done. And so I'm working with the mayor's office to make sure that that's taken care of so that we can finally finish that project. Another thing that I'm working on is ensuring that women are paid well and fair and equal to the work of men. That's extremely important because I know what it's like to be paid unfairly and to have lost a job. And our family depends on the mom just as much as they pay our dad, and this is the right thing to do. So I'm working with the departments to ensure that we pass a resolution ordinance that support that and ensure that happens. Another thing that I'm working on is, I want to put it down here. I want to make sure that we have responsible banking. That means that working with a bank to ensure that they are providing loans and services to women and communities of color. Because the folks that don't need the capital are the ones that are getting the capital.
Yeah.
But we have minority, we have small women businesses and community members that need access to those capital so that they can start their own business or pay their mortgage or get a new mortgage. And so those are highly important, and we need to invest in the human capital as well.
I have no idea of the skills it takes to be a politician, but I mean, I think you can enumerate the number of schools you have in your district and the number of banks or quasi-banks. Is there like a credit union in the district?
There's a highway credit union.
Okay.
Yeah.
And does it seem like you're kind of against the banks and maybe in favor of them?
When we look at national politics, there seems to be a lot of division. Mm-hmm. But at the local level, we all need to work together because our lives are impacted directly and immediately. Mm-hmm. And so working with our two biggest banks that the city work with, where we have leverage, it's U.S. Bank and Wells Fargo. Those are probably the only two banks that is capable of working with us and having the flexibility and the resources to work with the city of St. Paul.
Okay. So. We have about 5 minutes left.
Sure.
So I want to hear about your vision for Ward 1.
I believe that, my time being a city council, no matter how long it is or how many terms or just this year or whatnot, I truly believe that I'm not an end to something great. I'm just a mean. I'm here and I have to do everything I can every day to treasure every day that I get to serve the constituents in the city of St. Paul, to prepare it well so that the next person, the next leader, or the next generation can really help our city be competitive across the country. And to do that, I can't do that alone. I actually need the district council, I need the community champions, the banks, the organization, all the stakeholders to come together so that we can leverage that kind of resource and co-create that kind of future. And so even though, I'm not sure what that's going to look like, what I do see is that everybody in Ward 1 has an opportunity for a good paying job. Right now, some of our youth are some of the highest percentage of unemployment. We also have an opportunity here to be the safest city around a central corridor or green line or transit like that. And so I really want us to be a leader in that sense.
What has surprised you most about the job of being a council member?
That the people in City Hall works extremely hard. At first I thought that they were just spending our tax dollar, right? But I go there and I see that people are working hard. They genuinely care about the city of St. Paul, and they have so much pride. Whether it's folks from the chamber or folks from the different departments, they work hard. But we still also need to ensure that the folks that work in City Hall and all the different departments, that they are reflective of the community. And so, I'm happy that they are working hard, but we need to make sure that it's representative of the city.
In MBA school, they say what you want to own is the bottleneck. And we live here in the Twin Cities between Minneapolis and St. Paul, and both the major transportation corridors, the interstate and now the Green Line, run right through Ward 1. It seems like we're incredibly well positioned to capture a lot of commerce because of that.
Right. Ward 1, it's I would say is the heart and soul of the city. I mean, I agree that downtown St. Paul is great, but I think next to that it's Ward 1. No offense to all the other ward, but so that's why the bus barn is extremely important. We get a lot of eyes going through Snelling, the busiest intersection in the state. And so imagine in the summer when you get millions of people or hundreds of thousands of people going to the state fair that comes through that area. The bus barn there has an opportunity to create wealth and to create jobs and affordable housing and senior housing and college housing to a lot of folks in that area. And so we need to be mindful of not just making this work for the developer, but working for everyone. And that's something that's extremely important for me. And I'm really excited about that. And, you know, you got it's called a Snelling Station. So light rail goes there, a rapid bus transit go right there. I'm really excited.
We got about 3 minutes left, and I want to save a meaningful question for the last 2 minutes, but I have a technical question we could spend 60 seconds on. Tell me about the bus barn. There was a bus barn, it was bulldozed, and now what's going up in its place?
Right now we are working with a group from Denver, an urban investment group, and so pretty soon here we'll have a final report on what the recommendations are, and then we'll work with RK Midway, who owns that lot. And then, you know, recently Super Value, Cup Food bought that Rainbow. So now, you know, they're a tenant player. And then part of that land is owned by the Met Council, but the city kind of govern on how the land is used. So that's why I said earlier, it's a private and public partnership coming together where maybe we can even share stormwater management. There's a lot of things that we could do there, and of course have green space. So that folks can enjoy that area. And then we'll put a master plan together, and then from there we'll build it in phases. So those are kind of the idea that's been swirling around in meetings, and so I'm really excited.
Just the name Bus Barn implies there are going to be some buses parked there at night.
During phase one, probably,
okay.
Right? But you know, eventually that's going to be built out, and it's broken up into different phases. The first phase would be to capitalize on that corner, you know, with the radius of corner of Snelling and University, and then kind of build that out.
Okay, you are obviously a role model for many younger people. We've only got about 90 seconds left. Did you have a role model growing up? Whose footsteps are you following in? Because you're inspiring, you must have been inspired.
You know, I think, you know, that's a great question. I read a lot about Dr. Martin Luther King. I read about Abraham Lincoln, George Washington, General Wayne Powell. But my dad left when I was 13. And so, you know, I grew up at the short end of the stick. And if any message I could send out there to young people, it's to read. Because if you don't like the world that you live in right now, read about the world where your world could be, and try to create that world.
So that's your shout out to the kids today, is read.
Yeah.
We got time for one more shout out. Do you have a website you want to plug?
Right now it's just the, of course, City Council website. So
okay.
You go to stpaul.gov and then look up Ward 1.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've been speaking with Councilmember Dai Thao of Ward 1 in St. Paul. That's all we have time for on the forum this week. Come see us next week.